Nidra. How are you?
I'm doing well, Jen, and how are you?
I'm great. I'm really glad that we've come to this point. Not that we're leading to anything, of course, but just, it's our natural comfort or, to sequence things. So coming to this topic of awareness, it's a beautiful sort of contrast to what we were talking about last time with personality. But feeling into awareness, and I feel even though we've always said that languaging, it can't describe the undescribable. Um, we still all attempt to describe it and like kind of define it and call it. So, when you're working with your students, like how do you approach them in when you finally get to talking about awareness, even though we're not striving necessarily? And we do know that some people feel like they're striving, even though we tell them we're already there. Like wherever there is, we're already there. It's already here.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting thing because what gets us into our spiritual journey is the very thing that we can't get to when we keep trying to get to it. But it's still, everyone needs a starting point, right? And so there's also nothing wrong with striving. But then as we get, further and further along, we realize that the striving actually doesn't help us get there. Um, But you mentioned awareness, and I think this is interesting because I say this to my students too. There are so many different words to describe what is indescribable. And so, yeah, awareness with a capital A, sometimes we use that just to describe this underlying or consciousness is another word with a capital C that gives rise to everything, right? Gives rise to us, but everything in this world. And so, yeah, I think that I don't know if every one of us who are on a spiritual journey is striving for awareness. Maybe we're striving for something that is not quite awareness. Maybe we're striving for even desires and things that may be a bit unclear. But ultimately, I think the question that we're really asking when we come into this practice is, who am I? I think that is ultimately the final question is, who am I? If I'm not any of these koshas or these layers of identification that we talked about in the previous episodes, then who is this person that is, or who is the one that is aware of all of these different layers of identification? And then what happens when we get to a point where we can discern our ego, our personalities, from that awareness of with a capital A, right? And I don't think there's an answer that I can give, to be honest, because I think I'm finding my way too. Um, and I've had glimpses of what I think, um, what it's like to experience that oneness with awareness. But ultimately, it is something that needs to be experienced and felt. And I think through going through the process of iRest, as we get, to experience ourselves, disidentify from these layers, these different koshas, that we begin to get a little bit closer to what it might actually feel like to be in touch with our essential nature. But I think what's really interesting is that sometimes we can get so focused on enlightenment that it's like, well, what do you do once you're there? You certainly can't live there if you want to continue living, a life that you're living now where you're participating in society and where you want to continue to interact with your friends and loved ones. So what happens once you find enlightenment? Is enlightenment even the goal? And what is the goal? If there is no goal, what do we do? And so I think that, and this is why I really love the last step of iRest, where they actually bring in um, this this maybe a bit of gentle guidance as to what can happen to help us integrate our experience once we've gotten to this state of awareness. Now what happens? And I think the really beautiful thing is that what the teachings is really trying to tell us is actually nothing changes. Nothing changes. In the end, life is just as it is. Your body will continue to be this body. Your mind will continue to think. You'll continue to perceive the world through your senses. But the difference is that you now see the world in a different way. So your perception is changed. And that perception shift is transformational. And so that we begin to understand ourselves not as the layers that we used to identify with. We now understand that we're not just our bodies, we're not just our breath, we're not just our emotions, our thoughts, we're not just the bliss and joy that we might experience. We're not our ego, we're more than that. And yet we have our ego, we have the joy and the bliss body, we have our thoughts, our emotions, our breath, and our body. So how can we live in a way that appreciates all of these things that we have, but also remember that we're also ultimately not those things. Those things live within us. Yeah. Well, how do you explain it, Jen? How do you see it?
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing, especially, after some of the classes where there's adults maybe, and, it's often that they share that they're trying to, silence their thoughts, or they're trying to become something else. And it's an interesting thing because I really appreciate how in iRest and integrative restoration, through all the teachings and the experiences, we realize that um, like you're already perfect, like to give them that reassurance. And it's okay, you don't have to sit still, you could walk around if you want to while you're doing an iRest practice or meditation, because ultimately all of this, in practicing, when we feel more self-regulated, or when the space is held for us, then we can bring it out into the world. So it's not meant to be just sitting in the perfect lotus position, going through, like, it's not meant to be that. And I'm so grateful for iRest and for Richard Miller, who's, the founder of it, encouraging us to really integrate it all the time. And I feel like, among all of us who practice and continue to practice and continue to study, we're continuing as students of our own life experience, and with the support of the dualistic teachings. Um, it's an interesting thing because even, Richard will say, just comparing the different teachings, and, this thoughts, Patanjali says this, and then, these other teachings say it this way, and just saying, like, yep, these are the teachings, right? And be curious and see what, works for you. So it's an interesting thing whenever I meet somebody. And I guess it does remind me of, before we started learning ourselves, and we sort of had those questions and beliefs that have, I guess, mostly sort of, I don't know, on their own kind of dissolved in some way, just naturally, because I feel like we can, witness a lot of these different, layers of the body, the breath, emotions and thoughts more and more in waking life, just as the practice is. More and more I notice a lot of the words that I didn't really understand in the practice emerging in real life, because I see how all of it, that the unchangingness, all of that's readily accessible to us in our waking lives, just as much as it is during our practices. So, yeah, so I feel like whenever I meet people with those questions, it's always very humbling for me to remember, with that being a beginner as well. And then also, beautiful to see that they're curious, and, that they're along this journey as well of discovery, and being able to reassure them that maybe they just needed to hear that they're okay. They're okay already. They're already okay. And everything that they're experiencing doing is, it's perfect for their path.
Yeah, I think that, what you said is exactly right, in that sometimes some people come into the practice almost to find a way to not live the life that they have. And it's okay, because I think a lot of people come for spiritual or seeking spiritualities because they don't feel okay. There's discontentment, there's some sort of struggle or suffering. Um, and that's really common, right? Because I guess, if you're completely content, maybe you're already there. Like, you're not going to be seeking a spiritual path. Um, but sometimes we might get so honed in on, oh, okay, this is what I need to do to change my situation, to change my life, that we forget that it's not so much that we're trying to do a practice so we can take to stop experiencing life. It's that the practices help us to live life. And so, and you might even argue that the real practice is life. So all of these, sessions that we do, whether it be yoga, meditation, and things like that, these are sort of training or skills that we learn like at school so that we can actually live a life where we can be okay, right? And so in that sense, then the whole point is about integration. The whole point is about how we can bring what we've learned and apply them into the real world, which is life. Because ultimately, it's life that we have to live, right? So, so I think that, yeah, I think it's really important for us to have a practice where we understand that we're not doing this so that we don't feel and not deal with life. We're doing this so that we can come back to life and be more resilient and to take a different take on it and to be able to find the beauty in it in life, in all the different forms, even forms that we may have perceived as negative, or maybe forms that we perceived as positive and we've become overly attached to. And so I think this whole practice is really trying to help us to realize that nothing is, you know, I was going to say nothing is real as we believe them to be. And I'm not sure if that's the right, wording that I want to use, but I think that sometimes we can get so caught up in our beliefs and our perception of reality that we refuse to see that there's a different way to interpret our reality. And I think that what this practice is telling us is not to say that our life is unreal, but that maybe the way that we see reality is all it's asking us is to keep questioning, well, is it real? Is it really the truth? Maybe it is, but maybe it isn't. But when we're so stuck or so firmly grasp onto something, there are no opportunity or no possibility other than the one that we kind of hold on to. And so I guess this practice is teaching us to, can we let go a bit and see what other possibilities or what other ways can we interpret our reality, and how might our experience change when we interpret our realities in a different way. And so I think this whole process, which takes us, from step 1 to step 10 of the iRest protocol, is ultimately asking us, is there a different way of experiencing life? Is there a different way of seeing life? And it gets us to a point where we feel open and feel okay and safe enough to look at another possibility.
You actually are making me think of, sometimes imagine, I guess, imagine consciousness, whatever, right? Having a play. And its play is in the form of you, the form of me, the form of trees, the form of everything that ends up, growing into life. And then even throughout the practice, we always keep coming back, no matter what layer we're in within the practice, or, talking about the body layer, the breath layer, we're always coming back to this. And then what's unchanging? It's revealing something unchanging every time, right? And we're also that unchangingness. We're also that pure being. So I love how that comes back over and over, because it's true, right? And when I think we're able to practice more and more, and then it naturally, unfolds in a physical way, in a habitual way, in many different layers that support us to seeing that, oh, that's so interesting. These are the possibilities. They're everybody, all of us are the possibilities. And I feel just as humble, I feel like with nature, those are the possibilities too. I'm just a humble, another piece of nature, and I just happen to be one that talks, and all of us have our heartfelt purpose. Their heartfelt purpose might be to be a tree outside in the park, bringing beauty and oxygen, all the different beautiful things. And we have our own heartfelt desire. So I feel like this is different appreciation of life, that we can take, we can take back. And then I think a big one for me as going through this was realizing that everybody's okay. Because initially I thought I needed to fix everybody, including myself, and fix everybody all around me. But there was nothing to be fixed, right? Because everybody's on their perfect journey. And I feel like I can rest assured, even though there's uncomfortableness sometimes, maybe it's bringing something out in me, or maybe it's a loved one's, or this is habitualness, or this natural human care. But ultimately, when using the practice, especially in living form in the curriculum of our life, I can see that everything is as it is. It doesn't need to be fixed or changed. We don't need to attach or detach from any of it, and yet it's okay. Which are exactly like the words that we use in the meditation.
Yeah, and that there will be people who would argue, well, nothing is okay, right? And then I think a lot of people, especially as we get into this type of inquiry, especially with the state of the world right now, there's a lot that comes up. And so I also want to acknowledge that there's a lot of people who may be learning about this practice and also finding it very hard to integrate, because perhaps it's easy to integrate well on a personal level, but then when it comes to a larger scale, sometimes we can get a little bit disoriented as to, well, how is that okay? How is that perfect as it is? And that's a different topic. It's a deep topic. I just want to acknowledge that, and to not to say I have the answer, but to ultimately, I still think that no matter what else is happening in the world, that doesn't mean that we don't do our own work, because ultimately it still has to, the first person that you need to work on is you. Right? You can't go and help someone else when you're also struggling. And in fact, when you try to quote unquote help someone when you yourself has not found a place of feeling safe within yourself, then all the thoughts, actions, speech, reactions are coming from a place of fear. And so when we start to when we're motivated, when our actions and behaviors are motivated by fear, then fear feeds into more fear. And I think that, to me, feeds into the problem more so than to relieve it, right? So I think that no matter what your intentions are in doing something, I still think it's important to come back to, well, what is driving that intention? And I think that when we have a problem with anything in the world, whether it's personal or something on a larger scale, part of this practice is also asking us to question, well, this is your belief around something, right? Well, no matter how righteous you feel, or whether how much injustice you perceive there to be, ultimately it's still a conditioned thought that you have. When it's a very strong feeling, right? You might feel very strongly about what's right and what's wrong, and I have those too. Right? There's definitely situations where I feel like that should not be happening, but even that is an opportunity for us to question and say, okay, where is that coming from? And this is not to say, oh, the world is perfect and nothing needs to be done. But I think the way that I take this practice to as a way to understand what's happening is that we still have to come back to this place where we feel okay, where we feel grounded, where we're coming from a place of wholeness and love, so that our actions can come from that place of wholeness and love. And then as we continue to tune into that, then and be guided by the deeper wisdom of the body, that I trust that we know what steps to take, whether it be to take steps on a larger scale or to continue with your personal practice, because no matter what you do will have a ripple effect. And so you may or may not be, an activist or to do something on a large scale, or you might be, right? You also have your own dharma in this world. Like there's a reason why you're here. And I believe that as we follow our dharma, our heartfelt desire, and if we're all doing that, then it will all lead us to play our, perspective roles and do what we need to do in this life to contribute to the greater good. But again, yeah, that's a really big topic.
For sure. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess when I think of awareness, um, perhaps I guess when I approach it, I'm maybe feeling like whoever's sort of discovering it has maybe gone through a lot of the practice, from like just starting off at the very basic, like you said, maybe developing their inner resource to even start this journey to meet with everything all over the world. Because there's such a long timeline, really. When people look at the history of the world and even look at the animal kingdom, there's always both ends of the opposites, like we talk about. There's absolute peace, and then there's like the violence that's in nature, even among plants. So I don't know if I guess it's unfortunate as a human coming out from saying that. I feel it's unfortunate when I look at those two opposites, extreme opposites, but iRest, teaches us that they always exist, right? And always have been. It's not worse, if you look at the long timeline of all the wars that have happened. So I guess for me, when I think of awareness, I feel like the person's already gone through a lot of the different layers of working with their inner resource to support their practice, to, like you said, finding their heartfelt desires. So they realize maybe what their desire and purpose, that they're able to contribute in this lifetime naturally, that feels right with that response in the body and in the breath and with the cognitions and perceptions, and even that joy that emerges from discovering, and then the personality, all of that. So coming back to awareness, I don't know, there's this feeling like it's okay. Like I feel there's this, because of all of the everything we just talked about, that we can settle, not settle like, not like continually send compassion and love for the world, but just in whatever, after going through all of that and then settling with knowing that just being as we are is already setting a space, a role model for others, right? Even if it's just that one person, sometimes that one person, and then that other one person, that ripple effect that naturally happens, right? So yeah, I guess for me, when I think of awareness, yeah, I feel like the people have maybe gone through all those other stages. So now we're getting to a place, of the deeper teachings of consciousness and spaciousness, and working with all those like feeling whole. But it's those opposites always, right? And just like the path of meditation, up and down, like sideways, in and out, always. And that's okay, I think. I feel like it's okay to keep, at our own pace, everybody's own pace, that they'll be experiencing this when they're ready, whenever that is. But yeah, the human experience is something else, maybe, or I don't know, maybe it's part of it, right? It's all curiosity.
Definitely part of it, right? Everything is part of it. Everything is life, and we can, and there's not a right or wrong experience either. So I think that, like you said, we're all gonna find our way, and we're all gonna find, our own pacing. And the way that I walk my journey might look different from yours, but I can only focus on mine. right? And you can only focus on yours and then trust that things are unfolding in the way that they need to. And we're going to be continually challenged, but then these challenges offer opportunities for us to grow. And we always have a choice to grow or not to grow. Even that is not right or wrong. So consciousness aren't bothered about you growing or not growing. It keeps offering you chances to grow, but you always have a choice to grow or not. Um, and that, there will be moments where we feel really confused about ourselves and our world and everything, perhaps. And then there will be moments of clarity. And then we'll find ourselves in confusion again. And I think that is also life, right? And then we we start to learn that, okay, even that is okay. Even when we don't understand why things are happening, even when things seem really bleak, and and in ways that we feel, saddened by or disheartened and things like that, as long as we come back to our own work, I think that's the best that we can do, right? When we come back to ourselves, then we know what to do next. When we're lost, it's hard to know, whether our actions actually are helping or not, right? But even that's okay.
I'm thinking for like one of the suggestions, I guess, because now, as we're coming towards like the ends of the koshas, the layers, as we've been talking about, um, maybe, yeah, like we offer a lot of different iRest practices in our recordings and online and in our different teaching places. So I think for me, I would really suggest for people to check them out and then even go to the iRest Institute. There's so many in their media library. Experience it. And the beautiful thing is you can be physically conscious walking around. You can be anything in between, or you could be in the most relaxed position, whatever that looks like, with an eye pillow, essential oils, and it's all a beautiful practice. So I feel like, um, especially as we're talking about awareness, and because yoga nidra was one of the best experiences and what's led to me pursuing and deepening with iRest. So I would totally suggest for someone to, listen to these practices, give yourself little and often, even little bite-sized chances to experience the whole iRest Yoga Nidra practice. Do you have some suggestions?
Well, I was going to say that, if you want to reach out to either of us, if you're in Canada or in Toronto, Canada, or Santa Barbara, California, so Jen is from Toronto, I'm in Santa Barbara. That I would love to, have our listeners come in for our classes or to seek us out. Or if you have any questions, you can definitely reach out. And also any suggestions for future topics that you want us to dive deeper into through the lens of iRest. So yeah, I would love to encourage connection.
It's been such a pleasure. So thank you so much to you, Dora, as always being, my great co-host and great friend that we can have these conversations, and just so lucky to have all these listeners tuning in, and hopefully, let us know how each of these different practices have felt for you during this season.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's been so much fun, Jen. I love doing these with you. Take care.
Bye.